Hi, welcome to this screencast seminar. In this seminar, we're going to focus on trend analysis, but first we'll have some check-ins and reminders. So the first thing is that in the lab this week, the trend analysis draft will be due at the beginning of the lab for peer review. So each trend analysis team has to have their draft available for another group to look at, either printed out, hard copy, or on screen. And then following lab this week, your team is going to submit a draft copy to the Dropbox, and that Dropbox is called TA Draft by Friday. So what we'll be doing in the lab is, of course, a peer review session, and then your final draft of the trend analysis will be due in the Dropbox at the end of week 12. Before we move on to talk about other things, having gone through the final drafts of the discourse community analysis, I want to emphasize that we do follow academic integrity guidelines, and that means that we have zero tolerance for plagiarism, and we have zero tolerance for the use of any generative AI such as ChatGPT or Bard or other applications like that, which essentially are used to do your writing for you. I will be checking all assignments. So what we're going to talk about here is some very useful information for you as regards the final submission of the trend analysis assignment. So what we can see here, this is a screenshot from the assignment sheet. You know things like the length of the assignment. You know that you need at least 3 secondary sources. You know those kinds of things. We also need 1 visual component as well. And here we're looking at a set of bullet points about all of the formal report components. Title page, letter of transmittal, the table of contents, the report body with the headings and the references. Now, what I want to point out in advance of the lab this week is that all that we require for the peer review workshop is the body of the report, So you can see in the box on the right-hand side what that amounts to. So let's break down the different components of the report, and you can see here I've got 3 columns for prefatory, and prefatory simply means things that come before. The second column is labeled body, the body of the report. And by the way, it's those components that we require for the peer review in the lab. And then in the right-hand column, we have supplementary items. So let's take a look at each one in turn. So in terms of the prefatory elements, one of the things that will be included in the final draft of the report is what we call a letter of transmittal. The purpose of a letter of transmittal is to introduce a report to whoever is receiving the report. So if we imagine in a real-world context, a group has been commissioned to write a report, and then they will deliver the report to the person who commissioned it, and typically that will come with a letter of transmittal. So the letter of transmittal provides a context for the report, and if there's anything notable about how a report was produced or distributed, that would also be included in a letter of transmittal. In terms of the conventions of a letter of transmittal, it's short. It is never more than 1 page. It may have a slightly less formal tone than the actual report, but it is still in a professional tone. If there were any issues to do with the completion of the report, the letter of transmittal may address those. And then another very important thing that a letter of transmittal does is to thank the person who commissioned or requested the report for the opportunity to investigate it. And then one other thing that is not on this page is if there's any business going forward from the report, the letter of transmittal mentions that as well. Here we're looking at a sample letter of transmittal. You can see that this is from a business context. And what we have done on the right-hand side of this screen is to annotate the letter of transmittal to show you the different component parts of it. The one thing I will say about the overall format is that this is what we call standard block format. All of the items, all of the components in the report are left justified. In other words, they line up along the left-hand margin of the page. So at the top we have, what I sometimes call a header block. There's the date, there's the name and address of the recipient of the report, and there is the salutation. Now, what is actually missing here, I must point out, above the date is a name and address for the creators of the report. So we'll expect you to add that in. Once we get into the body of the report initially answers questions such as, what is this? So this is the report you commissioned. What does the report contain? So we're expecting you to summarize very, very briefly what the content of the report is. Is there anything actionable, or is there a main deliverable to the report? And then in the final paragraph, we have, the second last paragraph, we have a statement of gratitude. We are grateful to the Pemberton staff, etc., etc. And then in the final paragraph, that's what we call a formal closing. And you can see that it does make a reference in terms of anything going forward. We'll be happy to meet with you and your staff regarding our report and its implications for the company. So another prefatory element, which I guess would follow the letter of transmittal, is a title page. And I don't think we need to spend very much time talking about a title page because it's a very simple element. It simply provides the key information about who created the report, what its title is, the date it was submitted, the course it was submitted for, etc. And that information, of course, is centered on the page. And key thing here, because this is a team-based assignment, is to list the names of the authors. And please, not just your first names, but let's be professional about this and list first names and last names. And we're saying alphabetical by last name. The next prefatory element is the table of contents. And you are quite familiar with what a table of contents is. Its purpose is it's a navigation tool for readers. It's more necessary in a longer, more complex document. This is a very short document that you are producing here, but it does minimally provide the reader with an overview of the organizational structure. The conventions of a table of contents are very simple. In fact, we've basically given you those with the template that we've provided for you. You have logical sequential presentation of the headings for the report with corresponding page numbers. And then another very important prefatory element is the summary. And for those of you who have only ever written essays, it may seem strange to have a summary that comes before the introduction. But the summary is intended as a standalone element. It is intended for a recipient who may not have time to read the entire report, but wants a thumbnail, one paragraph snapshot of what's in the report. And that's what the summary does, including the conclusions and recommendations that are made at the end of the report. We're saying that a summary is not more than 25% of the length of the report. I'll go one step further and say it really shouldn't be more ever than one paragraph in length. So that's, in short order, the summary. And then, now that we're done with talking about the prefatory elements, let's talk about what we call the supplementary parts. And by supplementary, we mean they're added on at the end of the report. Of course, we have a references page, and we have been doing a lot of work on that. You are familiar with it. You know it has to be in APA format. and I have been talking a lot, probably very repetitively, about what an APA format references page looks like. The other thing that is sometimes appended or added onto a report is an appendix or appendices. And this is not a mandatory part of the report or of any report, but let me give you an example of what that would be. Let's say you had a table, a full table of statistical data that was important in terms of a summary point that you were making in your report. Now, it wouldn't be appropriate to take up a whole page of your report to include that statistical table, so you could briefly summarize it in the body of your report and then say, you know, for the data set, please see Appendix 1. Thanks for listening in to the screencast of this seminar, and just a reminder again that your rough draft of the trend analysis is due at the beginning of this week's lab for a peer review workshop. We'll see you then.